Welcome to the Humans and Earth podcast. We bring you inspiration and practical resources for healing our planet and ourselves. It is time for soulful contributions that regenerate life on Earth.
I'm Helen Claire Harmon, a thought leader and teacher who believes we're ready to renew Earth and heal ourselves in the process. Welcome to today's episode. Welcome back to the Humans and Earth podcast. I am really excited today to bring you a conversation with Riue Melvina Brown. She holds an MBA and also a doctoral degree in educational innovation and leadership. She's also an angelic shaman, a Karuna Usui Holy Fire Reiki master, a quantum healer, a sound healer, a spiritual advisor, permaculture designer and teacher, a licensed massage therapist, a beekeeper, and a budding herbalist. Her heritage is African American and Cherokee Indian, and she has studied under Native American medicine people. She's the owner of Inner Source Wellness Center and Lemu Sacred Regenerative Urban Farm. She is as connected to the celestial realms as to the earth, as she feels they are connected, and it is our time to express that reverence in like kind for all beings. You can find her work online at innersourcewellnesscenter.com, and I will publish that address in the show notes. Welcome, Melvina. It's really nice to be in conversation with you today. As you might recall, I somehow bumped into you on Facebook, and I think I saw permaculture, and I thought, oh, well, maybe we want to connect. And then once we talked, I think we discovered that we do really have a lot of perspectives and values in common, and also some aspects of our life pathways. And as I mentioned to you, what I really wanted to bring to the Humans and Earth audience is, well, any discussion of your path and your work. But I wanted to start with having you talk to people about what it's been like for you to have these two big pathways in your life that are rather distinct. You've had a career in the business world, you have conventional degrees, your MBA, your EDD, you've been very successful in the business world, and you also have this rather extraordinary list of experiences and qualifications as a healer on the more holistic side of things. I know you're not entirely unique in that way, because many of us right now have either a conventional background or we are still working in a conventional setting or career, and we're also exploring or cultivating this quote unquote more holistic side. So I would love to invite you to begin by just talking about that rich interwoven path in whatever way you want to share about it.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Helen Hunt, for having me here today. This is really an honor, and as you mentioned when we first spoke, I had mentioned to you, I am not one who typically will express in these types of venues. I'm kind of like your behind the scenes type person. Of course, you see my little community videos, but there was something about our conversation, and I recognize, that, source energy places people in front of you along your journey. And if you are aware and you're awake and you're paying attention, you recognize that sometimes these people are putting your path for a specific reason. And generally that is for them to receive something from you and you to receive something from them. So, from that standpoint, I recognize that we were, of course, very much aligned, and from a purposeful standpoint, and it was the light. I could feel that energy. in our initial conversation. So, again, I'm very thankful and grateful to be here today, and to be able to express on your platform. And hopefully, whatever we're given today, folks in the audience will find it useful and beneficial to them. So this big question of the holistic journey, you know, we we come up in this world, and first of all, one of the things that I'd like to say is at this point in my journey, I've become aware that everything that we're going through on this planet, all the design that's happened, it's all intentional, and it's all intentional ultimately to satisfy the purpose of us understanding who we really are, and understanding, and in that's purpose, in that's the big purpose. A lot of times what happens is people start to wake up, they come in touch with their various gifts and things, and they're searching, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? But the purpose in that is to discover the magnificence of the beings that we actually are. That movement from going from the outside to within, and that within connection, that's where the real magic starts to happen. That's where we start to recognize our connection to source. That's where we start to shed. That's where we start to heal. And that's where our gifts that we are all born with start to come to the surface. We may be these individualized expressions of the one that has created us. We may look different on the outside. We may, come from different races. We may have different sexuality connotations. Those are all things that I consider part of this human suit that we wear. We come into this lifetime and we each have this human suit that we're given for this particular journey. And then based on our belief system, we may come back again in another human suit. But what stays constant is what's going on within us. And that is the same for each individual. That is our true interconnectedness. That's how we're connected to one another. And I believe that the journey that we are on while we're on this human plane is not only to realize that interconnectedness between each other as beings, but our interconnectedness to every being, whether that be plant, whether that be animal, whether that be beings that aren't physically on this plane, so we're, and through that whole discovery and through that whole journey, we start to relinquish some of these external things that have beared down on us, that have created fear, that have created this environment where there's duality, where there's this hierarchy that exists, which is, I consider, part of the illusion of things. Everything that's outside of us, that's really kind of the illusion of things. With what's inside of us, that's what's real. But that's where the work happens. So, our journey of discovery, our journey of purpose, and it's not linear. Our so-called environment is defined in a very linear fashion because it's a more of a controlled structure. Okay, and that in itself keeps us in a place of less discovery, if you will. Okay, but we're in this time frame right now that is a very, very unique time frame, but it has a lot of semblance around things that we've experienced before, whether it was hundreds of years ago, whether it's thousands of years ago, whether it was hundreds of thousands of millions of years ago, and we are on this spiral, if you will. But each time we go around this spiral, we're elevating higher and higher and higher. So, we're in this time of ascension, and this means different things to people, based on their belief system, of course, and you made reference a little bit to the alternative holistic earlier and the conventional, so our conventional way of thinking and being a lot of times is based on this infrastructure that we currently have existing on the earth plane, and our ability to break free from this infrastructure is part of that realization, that unfolding, that unwinding, that we experience in some way. So, the journey from moving from the outside, within, kind of becomes, if you will, the flagship for a lot of the type of work that I try to support in my practice and try to share with folks. And it's work that I do for myself every day. If you had this conversation with me 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, it would have been very, very different, because we're always on this constant path of evolvement and discovery and letting go and releasing and awareness. And through that process, we're realizing different aspects of ourselves. It's just such a wonderful journey. So, I think that, from the outset, folks should want to really understand that this journey is very specific to them, but it's very impactful to the greater whole of things. And it centers around choice and experience. We have a lot of mechanisms in our society that, whether they be coming from a more, different spiritual belief systems, the way our capitalistic structure is, the way our governmental structure is, these systems have been put in place to kind of really narrow that aspect, get us in line, if you will. Okay. So as we're all waking up, we're realizing, hey, we're so much more than these structures that have been imposed on us and put in place. We're a lot bigger than a lot of these structures. And, so the boat's shaking a little bit, right? You're seeing all this outpicturing happening. Some people sit back and they say, where did this come from? But it's always been here. It's been building, okay? And it's part of the new system, the old systems breaking down, because we as beings are waking up. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yes. It sounds like over your decades of practice and exploration, you have come to a sense of yourself as a wholeness. Because I think that's one of the things you were just conveying. My sense is that some people who are at an earlier stage on their path of waking up or looking more broadly can feel divided or fragmented. And it sounds like that's not particularly a pain point for you anymore, but I'm wondering what you recommend for people who are aware of, we'll call it, as I said, the conventional world, with some of the aspects that you just named, the economy or societal expectations or career training. But they're also becoming aware of this bigger picture, the spirituality, the holism, maybe the ascension story. And they can feel really fractured. Mm-hmm. So how did you get to this point where you seem to feel whole and balanced and not divided? And what do you recommend for people who are having maybe some struggle with that?
Well, First of all, one of the things I'll qualify this with, and I kind of referenced this earlier, is this is an ongoing process. Just last week, I was a little bit fragmented, you know? And I think what happens is because of the energy and the things that are going on in this world and this dimension in general, things are just going to be. There are going to be things that go on around us, okay? But our ability to shift and change and recognize this experience for what it is changes as we become awake, okay? And as we continue to evolve. For instance, if something happened to me maybe 5 years ago where I had a given experience, I might be just swirling indefinitely around. You know, I may have more of an awareness today. Okay, that's where that's coming from. This is the part that I have the ability to have some influence on. And the other part becomes acceptance and allowance of what is. And I can tell you that those are the two things that are probably the most challenging things for even the most perceived evolved person to manage on a daily basis, because the human condition a lot of times just doesn't want to allow, or it just doesn't want to accept. And this could be for various reasons. Our own experiences can play into that. The vulnerability of those experiences can play into that. So, there are kind of tools that I have in my toolbox that I use every day, and the first part, of course, is pulling the experience within as much as I can. Now, based on where people are at a given point in time in their journey, that's going to be easier or not easier, because when you pull that experience within, as opposed to keeping it out here, it might mean that you have to look at certain things. You might have to observe certain things that you might not be ready to observe, or you might have to accept certain things that you're not willing to accept, or you may have to allow certain things. But that's okay, because if you get to that point where maybe not quite yet, sacred spiral comes around again. Okay, this is an iterative, infinite process. And a lot of times we become our worst enemy because we get in the way of that process, But we have to give ourselves permission that it's okay. We have to give ourselves permission that, yeah, we're going to get in the way of our process. We're going to fall. We're going to experience fear. We're going to get upset. We're going to be human. That's who we are. Okay? And in the broader infrastructure that's been defined around us, it takes away that ability a lot of times to give ourselves permission. So it's almost like, I say to people, think of it like taking in every situation that you encounter, flipping it on its head relative to how you've been taught to deal with that situation, what the expectation that has been given to you relative to a certain situation. Just flip it on its head and think about, okay, well, what if I don't do this way?
What if I don't follow this rule in
if,
my family or my culture or my profession? Yeah, I love that.
Right. What if I don't? And let yourself sit there and think about that. Well, I've been told if I don't follow this rule, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. I've been told if I don't go and practice this a certain way, that X, Y, Z is going to happen. That's so built into the framework of our existence. Okay, so we're going through this unwinding, if you will. that is tied directly to the ascension process. We're unwinding, we're shedding these layers, and that's a tool that I use today for myself. And it's been very, very beneficial to the people that I've shared it with. They'll come back and say, wow, I did what you said. I thought about, what if I just flip it on its head? And then the other thing to start injecting into that process is, like I said, give yourself permission, whatever that might be. You're going to misstep. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, and you have to allow that for yourself. That's your process. My process is going to be different from yours. And that's okay, because a lot of times, because of the way our culture is, and it wants to fit us all into this little box, we compare ourselves with other people. Oh, well, they did this and they had this result. I need to do the same. And then they beat themselves up, or they feel fear, or they feel anger, all those things that come from the egoic mind. That has been socially engineered into who we are. And we're trying to unwind and release that from ourselves.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying about questioning the standard rules and assumptions and turning them around or flipping them on their head, at least as an inquiry process. Because if you hadn't done that, you would probably just have a business career, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have all these wonderful other experiences and abilities that I listed in your bio. And I can certainly relate to that, because based on my conventional training and years in my career, I wouldn't be doing a lot of what I'm doing if I followed the very, very narrowly defined rules. Mm-hmm. So I think it is a really important kind of question or tool to be sharing with people for them to play with. As you said, we're also in this time of intense questioning of the old structures. Do we want to keep this system? Do we want to keep that system? Well, do we still want patriarchy? Maybe not. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean to kind of give ourselves permission to choose in a new way? I know that you really ground your spiritual process in a lot of interaction with the earth through your permaculture, your shamanic work. I've seen your Facebook photos of your gardens, and they make me really want to come and visit them. I have gardens myself, as I think you know. Talk to us about what you do with the natural world and how that's an important part of who you are.
Well, one of the things I will say initially is that, nature it's here to teach us. I think all these beings that are here are extensions, from a soul standpoint, from the angelic realm and other dimensions. And they're a reflection. We were talking about the bees earlier. And to just watch how these communities take care of one another. I'm just so fascinated just being out there with them. And I, of course, on a daily basis, see all types of things out here on our permaculture homestead, because, we've created this ecosystem and this environment. But, plants in general, I'm so energetically sensitive. I could hear their vibration and things when I was very, very young. So, nature has always been here to help show us and try to teach us not only who we are, but our greater and broader connection and how we should be, in community with one another. And there is real grounding energy that's associated with that. It also acts as a connector and throughway and gateway into other dimensions and realms and things of that nature. And that's where the shamanism comes into play. And my work, because of my, with a lot of folks who may be here with the purpose of really focusing more on the shamanic piece of it, which is the earth piece of it. And my journey, as I mentioned, I was just as connected to the angelic celestial realm as I am to the earth. The angels started speaking to me when I was very young, and the other beings of light. And I believe till this day, knowing that some of the experiences that I've had, they've been present with me for a very, very long period of time. It's in this latter experience of me being a bit older now and recognizing how present they have been. But at the same time, nature was also a very big part of my existence. So from a practice standpoint, I had to listen for a while to see, okay, how am I supposed to offer my gifts, to support the world? Because, I have this heritage, I'm connected to the earth, and these healing gifts through my experiences that I've had of, having times where I've had three, and I don't know if we talked about this, but I've had 3 times in my life where I've crossed over and came back. So having that experience of knowing that there's so much more than what we're seeing here. And what is the bridge to that? And being so connected to the earth plane. So that became kind of like the core for my practice, okay, blending the two together. And it was when that came to me, the practice itself kind of just flew. When I'm doing a shamanic session, shamanism is on its core, from a core definitional standpoint, is being a channel, to open up into other dimensions, other realms, to bring healing into the present realm, or to allow for, not to bring, but to allow for the healing to take place with individuals, because all of this has to work in concert. I always say to folks, I'm not doing this, I'm just a presence. I've done my work to a point where that communication can take place, and I continue to do that work. So based on what you're allowing, what you're receiving, that opening is being created for you. And it's different for everyone. There have been, through the work that I've done, very deep healing experiences that people have had. They've seen a lot of things take place. And I always say, folks, you're not going to know what to expect, because on a conscious level, there are things that you're setting intention for, but you also have those things on a subconscious level and even on a soul level that you're working towards. So, the practice that I have is really marrying a lot of the earth practices with the celestial practices. You come into a typical shamanic session, I work a lot with crystals. So I work with crystals, I work with plants, I work with sacred geometry. All these things have energy. Do I know from one session to a next what that grid's going to look like? It's channeled down. It has a lot of energy. It creates an opening for beings of light to come, and people have experienced that. They've experienced folks working on them in concert with the work that I'm doing. And depending on your sensitivity level, what intentions and things that you're setting for yourself, I do bring in a lot of the Native American Indian medicine practices into the work as well. But it's really a combination of all these things. And, as I continue to experience and educate myself around esoteric ancient wisdom, I came to know that, millions of years ago, a lot of these civilizations were using this combination of plants, Christology, and things of that nature, and sacred geometry to do their healing work. and do their communication. So, I just have accepted the fact that I'm a channel from that standpoint. I've also channeled down light language, which has a lot of healing associated with it. And I can tell you, when that first started happening, it was almost, I heard my little puppy, when her first bark, I was in my office and I heard this, and that's how the light language came through me, because I was trying to hold it back because it was, from a human standpoint, foreign. But then when I let it come through, and a lot of times during the shamanic sessions, I'm not aware of what it sounds like. They say sometimes it's almost like multiple people are singing through me sometimes, and but I'm so filled up. So, a lot of these things have come into play, as I've started to open up, as I had some of my experiences. I know with the grid that started coming down, that was right after one of the times that I had the experience of crossing. The same with the light language, so these are all part and parcel to the experiences and the remembrances that I've had. So it's and I'm feeling and seeing that there's going to be so much more coming.
Maybe because the world is increasingly ready for it.
Yeah.
Might be part of that. I mean, I know it's a developmental process for the individual person like yourself, but also there's that maybe growing receptivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a, as I'm sitting here talking to you right now, I have tears behind my eyes, because the vibration that's associated with that is so heart-centered. There's so much love that just comes through all the time. And I'm like a little antenna. People walk up and they touch my hand and they feel the vibration coming through. And when I'm talking about these things, and I'm talking about this healing, and having the understanding that that is in all of us, all of that exists in all of us. We're not special, but we all are special, if you will. And the human consciousness, the ego of the human consciousness, sometimes wants to put us in these hierarchical structures, even in the healing community, because that's part of our journey. We're still releasing those things that are of the ego mind. And we have to always constantly turn the lens around to look at ourselves and say, okay, where is my intention around that? Because the universe will always speak in concert to the intention. You can put a certain thing on the outside, or perception on the outside, but the universe will always speak to the intention that's coming from your heart, because that's the frequency that you will be emanating, and it will work in like kind to that. So, I can always somewhat monitor how that is going, because I fill up with so much emotion. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in the right place here for myself. I'm moving in the right direction. So I've learned to listen more. And listening is, again, it's a challenge for the human condition. I listen and observe and I trust. But again, that is part of the sacred spiral, because we have to be doing the work, and we have to be releasing those things that no longer serve us. And sometimes it takes courage. Sometimes it takes being okay with standing alone and not being the popular one. Okay. So there are just, and it's different for everybody, and it's beautiful for everybody.
What attracted you to permaculture, or what are you doing with permaculture in your community? I know you're a teacher I know you have your permaculture farm or homestead. Are you experiencing that primarily as a set of strategies that are meaningful to you that you are practicing, or have you been involved a lot with offering those into the larger community? I would love to hear about that, because it's such a beautiful set of tools for interacting very respectfully and with a lot of sensitivity with the natural world.
Well, it's interesting because, and I would say what I'm about to say is probably true for many people, is I was doing permaculture way before permaculture became permaculture. And if you look at the heart and the essence of what permaculture is, it's indigenous practice.
Yes.
And if one of the things that I've tried to do in my small bubble is to educate people around that aspect. You know, and I think where permaculture has had an important role, the concept of permaculture itself, it's made it assumable to more people, and it's made them kind of take notice of it. And that's where I think the credit of that, it should be given. But I think there's also a reverence and sacredness and recognition as to really what is the true history around permaculture.
Absolutely.
And I'm beginning to see, which is wonderful, a lot of the larger permaculture communities starting to more or less tap into that. And
Yes.
it made me happy to be able to see that. So
I've noticed that a lot in
mhm,
the last 1 to 2 years, maybe,
mhm,
that there's
yeah,
a lot more open acknowledgement that permaculture is a set of indigenous practices. And
mhm,
maybe anyone can use it because we're all in the 21st century together, and because
mhm,
actually all of us have indigenous roots of some
yes,
kind.
yes,
But
yes.
I agree with you. It's so important to see it in those terms. And I'm really happy that that discussion has become more honest.
hmm And so, having said that, I think your question is how using it in the community. One of the things we go through this. We spoke earlier about the conventional versus the holistic. And that dynamic, it appears to it's in play with just about everything. And my journey has always been to try to go out and get the information that I need to be able to get the point across to make things accessible so that I can share it with others. Okay. And I experienced this concept, permaculture. There was an individual who had come to our center to do a workshop one year, and did actually a couple workshops here. And I'm thinking, wow, well, we're doing this stuff here. We've been doing it here for some time. And then, in my, I guess, my exploration and my research, I realized, wow, this is a really big deal that's out here right now. And how can I, get myself in a position where I can be able to offer this to more people and share it in some way so that they can get useful value out of it, and then go through the process of contributing into the greater environment. So, I really have, and it's interesting that I'm having this opportunity with you right now to share, because the center is in its journey is just in this turning point where, all these little um, seeds that have been planted are now starting to sprout, and I've done, I set Inner Source up as an LLC. We pretty much almost run it like a not-for-profit. And of course, there's benefits either way. But with everything that we've done here, I've always tried to make it accessible. It wasn't about the money to me as much as it was about trying to make things accessible to people so that they could be able to have something to support their journey in some way and some knowledge to be able to contribute to the environment. So we're getting our high tunnel this year on. That's a big deal. We have the bees with the mushrooms. We started the infrastructure of the garden with native plants. Then we added edibles, wild edibles to it, medicinals, with me being the budding herbalist. So we have a representation from all these various kingdoms here right now that are working in concert. We have community garden. We allow people to come here and do volunteer work. We keep it open and accessible. When we start our community nursery next year, we're going to do a derivative of a CSA where people can actually come and pick from the garden and the site based on what's available.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I recently was contacted by the director of one of the urban farms in Wilmington, where they're trying to develop this food hub, where they're trying to get different urban farms and permaculture sites to be able to contribute to this hub. So I'm going to become part of the planning committee for that. So I'm really excited about that, because what that does is it gets me connected into the city network where people need some help. It's interesting. I'm probably like 20 minutes outside the city. And Delaware is so distance sensitive that 20 minutes outside the city to them seems like 200 miles, so, and people who live in the city are very city specific. And, we have folks that live in the city that come to the center, but I've tried to, over the years, to my ability, try to make myself accessible to that downtown environment. And I think that
I'm just laughing because I grew up in the West, where you might drive 3 or 4 hours for a day trip. And I know here in the East and in a state as small as Delaware, it's a totally different
yeah, it is. I mean, you can drive from one end of the state to the other in 2.5 to 3 hours. And it's just pretty incredible. But, again, we have the permaculture design certification program. Have had a couple people go through it. This next year, I'm really excited, because one of the things that I've been trying to do is bring people outside of the area to participate in this program. One of my friends, Yango Antelio Wycliffe, who's in Kenya and has run this permaculture program for children, and it's a very, very different environment, is going to participate remotely in our permaculture design program.
Oh, I want to do that with you, I think, actually. I'm still not certified, and I just haven't had the time or the resources to do it, but we have a family connection to Kenya, and I was actually there in March, sort of unexpectedly, and I've been reading, there's some really wonderful things going on with permaculture in Kenya.
Yeah,
that's
very
exciting.
That's really exciting. And so I'm totally excited, and he was totally thrilled when I reached out to him about that. We have some people in the local community who are master permacultures. C. Dale Hendricks, who he's kind of been one of my mentors, and he and his wife refurbished a farm up in Landenberg, which is about probably 15 minutes from me. And it's a 4-acre permaculture site. And he was originally an owner of part owner of a nursery, but his interest was really around the natural environment and permaculture and his knowledge base around certain types of trees, more specifically pawpaws. He's doing probably everything you can possibly imagine up on his site. So the students will have an opportunity to go to his site and be able to learn quite a bit, as I did. And he has a willingness to not only have his site be someplace where folks can come and see maybe things even more mature than we have on our site, but actually come in and teach and instruct. You know, we have another individual who was actually an adjunct here at one point in time, April Colburn. She's a full clinical herbalist. She's probably been doing it for about 30 years. Very, very spiritually connected with the plants. One of the reasons why I enjoyed having her here, because, you know, herbalism can go across a very, very broad spectrum, is her heart-centered connection to the earth and the greater environment and the greater community, and understanding the connection to that. We also have someone from the Baltimore community who is, she's a farm to table chef, but she kind of leads a lot of things with the urban farms. Baltimore has a booming permaculture urban farm community down there. They are really embracing the concepts of community and really what it means. And I think that our environment here in Delaware has a lot that they can glean from somebody like that. We have folks that are involved in natural building and very, very much into plants. Some of the videos that you saw me showing around the gentleman who was taking down their trees, he's a permaculturist, a ton of plant knowledge, so he's going to be participating. So we have these folks that just, you know, I knocked on their door and I said, hey, you know, we're going to do this next year. And by the way, we're not going to charge $1,800 for somebody to go through the program. We're charging them $350 because we want folks to have the information. They need to have the information during this time. It needs to be accessible. And if there's somebody who really wants to come and they can't even do that, then some way will make it meaningful. For me, I'm not looking to make money from this. I'm looking to be able to share and teach. So anything we collect, I would give that as a love donation to the folks who are participating. You know, so it's more important for me to have, for people to have this knowledge. And that's pretty much the way I've been with my healing work. And I'm learning to balance that a little bit more, because sometimes I give too much where I don't allow it to be sustainable for our center. But I'm very excited about, you know, our permaculture program. We have another individual who does permaculture centered around empowerment of women. And, you know, and she's going to be bringing her experience to the group as well. So, you know, that's a big deal. And that's going to be 6 weeks, where folks will go 2 nights a week and then all day on Saturday. And the Saturdays will be for field work and field trips and projects. We're going to make sure it's both virtual and on site so that we give folks flexibility. And we'll see how that works, you know.
Oh, I want to do it.
Yeah.
I want to do
yeah.
it. I love hearing you talk about what you're actually doing with permaculture and offering it to people, because as you and I know, and I hope our listeners either already know or will look into permaculture, it's so empowering. Whatever your quote unquote problem or interest or concern is, permaculture can provide some support. If it's community building, community food needs, your own health, your ability to grow your own food or interact with the natural world, permaculture can support in all of those ways. So I am thrilled to hear what you're doing. I think it's really exciting.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled too. And I'm like happier. You know, I've kind of been doing this little happy dance for the last couple of weeks because, you know, like I said, I kind of feel we're turning the corner, because sometimes people don't realize, you know, how much you've been doing, you know, behind the scenes. And I've had a lot of difficult times throughout the journey where I didn't know whether I was going to even be able to maintain, because I am doing this on my own. And I've had the life situations that happen where the job becomes, you know, it's not there. And, still along the journey. And that's what I say. You're still going to go through life experiences. You're still going to go through the things, no matter how evolved you may think you are. You're going to go through those human experiences, but how you manage to those, what choices you make, how you continue to just put one foot in front of the other and have the trust that if I know that my greater purpose is to do things from the intention of higher purpose and in betterment for everybody, not just myself, then I'm going to continue to be an instrument for that. And I'll only give a little piece of that because that's a lot of the content to the book that I'm writing, what's involved in that, and the soul garden, okay? And that is very much that. You're not shielded from life experiences just because you're opening up and evolving. They're working in concert. So you're constantly in the mix of how do you maneuver, how do you move, how do you flow down this path, trying to maintain your purpose, trying to maintain your vision and focus, but still managing to the encumbrances and the unraveling and the unveiling of what life is, So, but there becomes a point where things start to become a little more synchronistic, and you notice that. And then you notice, okay, I really understand what manifestation means. Everyone uses the various buzzwords out there, but really, what does it mean? There's multiple strings that, are in alignment, or you want to be in alignment, and this creates this magical happening, if you will, but there are multiple things in alignment, and being able to identify what those are.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been working with your bees a lot lately.
Yes, I have. And we had a little bit of a situation this past week with everything because one of two of the most harmful things associated with trying to raise bees are mites and beetles. And so I've experienced both of those in my first round here. So we've been trying to get the hive stronger, so that going into the winter time, it has the best opportunity for survival.
Yeah.
And I think we've been successful at it. We've merged another community, and I was out checking them this morning when I went into the garden to do my prayer. And they're buzzing around happily. They're merging. There is some, there are some that didn't make it, but you're talking now, the hive has gone from 10,000 to about 20,000 bees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I just read this week, there's a new book coming out. It's not quite published, on biodynamic beekeeping.
Oh, okay.
So I'll try to remember to check the title for you, because I think it might be available for pre-order, but maybe, the biodynamic approaches go so deep with really holistic care, and it sounds like a lot, but maybe there will just be a few nuances that might be helpful there.
There's always room for more, Helen. I guess the more you think the more that you realize you don't know, because it's really an infinite journey of discovery. And, I find myself now really in this place, of childlike wonder. There's just so much to become aware of, so much to learn, and I think when you allow yourself to be open to that, then you're creating that energetic exchange and that throughway for things to just come through. and that in itself becomes a big part, of our journey,
Yeah.
to
Well, and the
allow
bees,
ourselves,
right?
yeah,
The bees themselves can probably guide you.
yeah,
I mean, I'm
and
sure they can. I'm sure they
yeah,
can. Yeah. It has been such a pleasure for me to be in conversation with you today. What I usually ask my guests to talk about as we close is, what's your personal vision of healthier people on a thriving planet? I know that concept conjures up all kinds of different perspectives and dreams and desires. And I think it's really important right now for us to be encouraging one another to have those heart-centered, optimistic, trusting desires for how we can continue to repair ourselves in the earth. So what do you think about or imagine when you consider that?
well, I go back to some of the statements that I said in the very beginning or shared in the beginning, is this one aspect of us continuing, because I believe wholeheartedly that we're in the thrust of this process happening right now, is having the capacity to look beyond what we see on the surface with individuals, looking beyond the human suit, because that part that's within us and that connects us, that's the most important part, you know. And interestingly enough, the outside part of us should not be creating separatism and divisiveness. That's our unique component that each of us offers. And along with that comes that conversation for us of acceptance around that. But being able to look past, and we are human, we are in this 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional ascending world, um, allowing ourselves to give ourselves permission that we are going to be human at times. And then there's the reverence and the sacredness associated with everything. One of the things that we try to do, in our practices here is to try to bring back that reverence, bring back that sacredness. When you're in the garden and you're interacting with different beings, have the respect for them, knowing that there's something that they're sharing with you, because when we start to form that type of relationship, we realize how important those beings are to the earth. And then we start to treat the earth in a different way. We don't just go outside and step on a bug because it's a bug. We start to think about, what is that bug contributing? What is that bug's purpose? If we know that it's helping to work the soil in some way, we're going to probably pick that bug up and move it to a better location and say, go at it, buddy. you know but it's bringing back, I think this is a time of bringing back the reverence and the sacredness for everything, because that allows us that connection to our heart. And I think we're seeing that more. We're seeing that beginning to unfold while all this other noise and chaos is bouncing all over the place, which I believe is intentional and it has a purpose. So, bringing back the sacredness, bringing back the reverence, and elevating that even more and expanding on that. And there are some things that we've done in the past where they weren't the most wonderful things, but maybe there were aspects of that that truly were wonderful, and bringing those wonderful things forward.
I love that. Thank you. I definitely agree with you about the heart-based reverence and coming to honor the sacredness in all life. Thank you so much, Riue, Melvina Brown. What a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks to everyone for listening. You can make sure you're on our newsletter list to receive updates about future episodes of Humans and Earth. Find us at humansandearth.com. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Humans and Earth. Please share this episode to broaden engagement in the regeneration our world needs. You'll find social media links in the show notes. To explore our other offerings, visit www.humansandearth.com.